Hello everyone, welcome to Hopeful Moments 1. Today, we're going to hear a story that reflects the unfairness and challenges tenants face when confronted with false complaints and a lack of support from landlords. In the end, the tenant is forced to move out even though they caused no problems whatsoever. Today's story will take you through a surprising situation. The woman Thunderfoot not only caused trouble and made up stories about the tenant, but she also engaged in acts of sabotage within the apartment, such as damaging the walls, placing screws in the garbage disposal, and wrecking the garage door opener. If you find this story interesting and filled with valuable lessons, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful stories. This story begins about 10 years ago. A long time has passed, but even today, whenever my wife and friends bring it up, we can't help but laugh. While it caused quite a bit of tension back then, now when we look back, it's all just a funny and memorable experience. What's interesting is that we never knew the real name of this woman, yet we always referred to her by a rather special name, Thunderfoot. This wasn't just a random nickname, it was the result of her actions, and you'll understand why as you hear the story. When I was 20, I decided to move into a one-bedroom apartment on the ground floor of a small apartment complex. My apartment was right under the one of an older woman, somewhere between 40 and 60 years old, which caught my attention the moment I entered the area. This was supposed to be a quiet living environment, but it was full of surprises, and little did I know, I was about to walk into a tricky situation. One important thing to note is that the landlord of this apartment complex didn't live on site. They only managed the property remotely, from a house several miles away, and their presence on the premises was only for occasional inspections. This meant that any issues related to the tenants had to be resolved through communication between the residents and the landlord, which led to many problems during my time there. Everything seemed beyond the control of the property managers because they weren't physically there to oversee the situation. And, as you'll see, this oversight created an environment ripe for strange and unbelievable situations to unfold. As soon as I moved into my new apartment, I started getting to know the neighbors, and one of the first things that caught my attention was the friendliness of the two elderly women living nearby. They were kind-hearted people who always greeted me warmly, making me feel comfortable in my new home. We often chatted and shared stories of our lives, and eventually became close friends. However, in those conversations, they also didn't fail to warn me about the woman living directly above my apartment. They told me she had been living there for nearly a decade, and during that time, every tenant living below her had been forced to move out after a short while. This made me pretty anxious, but I thought as long as I was peaceful and didn't cause any trouble, everything would be fine. However, as soon as I moved in, it was immediately apparent that the noise from the apartment above made it impossible for me to find any peace. Every time the woman moved around, her footsteps were so loud and forceful that I felt like the ceiling of my apartment was about to collapse. It seemed like she never walked lightly, and every step felt like a mini earthquake in my place. These noises not only irritated me but also made the entire room shake, forcing me to stop whatever I was doing and wait until she was done moving. Because of this noise, my friends and I started calling her by a special nickname, Thunderfoot. It was a name that was both fitting and humorous, sarcastic, but also very accurate. We never dared to use that name directly to her face, but we would joke with each other every time we heard her stomping above us. It was a name tied to the strong and relentless sounds she made whenever she moved, and it made my friends and me think of a storm or thunder rumbling down from above. While the nickname was playful, it also reflected the annoyance we had to endure every day. Ironically, whenever I invited my girlfriend or a few friends over to watch a movie or play games, we always made sure to keep the volume as low as possible. We never made a lot of noise, and we even reminded each other to be careful not to disturb her. But for some reason, her footsteps would still echo down through the ceiling, louder than the sound of our talking and laughing. And as a result, the landlord would constantly call me, saying that she had complained about the noise I never even knew I was making. It was a ridiculous situation. She stomped so hard that it made the ceiling shake, yet she complained about the noise we made, even though we were always trying to stay quiet. Most of my encounters with Thunderfoot followed a pretty similar script. She would stick her head out the window and immediately start yelling at me, my friends, or even my girlfriend, just because we were smoking on the sidewalk, an activity that was completely legal. What made me truly frustrated was that she had no legitimate reason to criticize us, as we weren't even standing under her window, we were just across the parking lot. That constant frustration haunted me every time she yelled at us, but there was nothing I could do but endure it. One day, I decided I couldn't take it anymore and had a direct confrontation with her. After one evening, when I was hosting a movie night with friends, she started stomping on the ceiling again. I couldn't control my anger anymore and knocked on her door. When she opened the door, I lost my composure. "Can you stop making all this noise? I've been trying to keep quiet, but you keep disturbing us. You have no right to do this," I said loudly. She looked at me with a cold, unsympathetic stare. "You have no idea what's going on here. Who do you think you are, doing whatever you want? You don't understand," she said with a tone full of contempt. I stood there frozen, unsure of how to respond. But then, she suddenly turned around and revealed a secret that shocked me. "You don't know, do you? Everyone who has lived below me has been kicked out because of him. The landlord always listens to me. And everything you're doing is just part of my plan." Her words were like a blow to the head. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It turned out that all along, I wasn't the one causing the trouble. She had intentionally created problems and put me in this situation. I was left speechless, not knowing what to say. Truly, I didn't know what to do anymore. But at that moment, I realized that I had been caught in a power game with no way out. Throughout this time, I kept good relationships with the other neighbors. They always claimed that they never heard any noise coming from my apartment and that they had no issues with me. This made me even more frustrated because clearly, Thunderfoot had complained to the landlord about every tenant below her, and strangely enough, the landlord always believed everything she said, even though there was no proof to back her claims. That sense of injustice weighed heavily on me. Finally, one of the neighbors told me about something very strange that happened when I wasn't home. One day, while I was at school, my neighbor saw Thunderfoot talking to a police officer right outside my apartment door. She had accused me and my friends of making noise in the apartment, even though no one was there. The officer, after hearing her out, went to check to verify, but even when he didn't hear any noise, he still knocked on the door and looked through the window. He confirmed with Thunderfoot that no one was in the apartment, but she insisted, "I know they're in there." I heard them laughing. My neighbor told me that the officer stood there for a while, clearly confused, and then left without doing anything, probably thinking she was just imagining things. This incident not only proved how eccentric Thunderfoot was but also highlighted the absurdity of her behavior and baseless accusations against me. It made me feel even more exhausted and powerless. After all the unreasonable complaints, the landlord finally decided to kick me out after just 4 months of living there. This really made me feel like it was unfair and disappointing, but what made it worse were the other neighbors. They were all very sad when they found out I had to leave. They told me that they really enjoyed having me around and were always happy when I was there. The feeling of being left behind and the emptiness of a community made me feel even heavier. They reassured me that this wasn't my fault, and this made me feel even more unfair. Thunderfoot had done this to all the tenants before me, causing trouble and making everyone leave. It had become her routine, like an unavoidable chain of actions. She simply didn't want anyone living below her, perhaps because she wanted the freedom to stomp without being bothered or judged by anyone. Maybe for her, living in a space of total solitude, without anyone disturbing her, was more important than anything else. This made me wonder, could she really be so lonely that she couldn't stand the presence of anyone around her, to the point of sabotaging the lives of tenants just to maintain absolute silence for herself? After all the challenges and injustice the main character went through, this story reminds us that in life, sometimes we can't control the situations or the people around us, especially when they act irrationally and hurt others. However, even when feeling unfairly treated or disappointed, it's important not to let those challenges take away our self-belief. The main character's story also reflects respect for each individual's privacy and peace, while warning against people who might ruin others' lives just for their personal gain. In similar situations, remember that we can't change others, but we can control our reactions and how we face tough situations. Always be patient, seek support from those around you, and don't hesitate to speak up to protect your rights calmly and wisely. Above all, don't let negative behavior from others make you lose faith in yourself and the values you stand for.